Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about the Pokemon Company addressing and promising Pokemon card reprints all throughout 2021 in order to help address the recent issues that the community has had with card shortages. More importantly, in today's video, we're going to be discussing how this false flag may not necessarily be an immediate resolution to all of the problems that our hobby has been seeing, and why you should approach this statement and all of the hype surrounding it with a little bit of caution. But without further ado, let's get into it. As you can see on screen right now, I have the support.pokemon.com page open, and at least for the particular site that I'm visiting, this was updated about 37 minutes ago. As you can see, I'm sure Pokemon's been making slight changes to it as time has gone. Now, this news originally actually broke on the official Twitter account. So as you can see right here, the Play Pokemon account is actually the account that broke the news and says, "We're aware of fans experiencing difficulties purchasing certain TCG products due to high demand, and in response, we're going to be reprinting impacted products at maximum capacity to ensure more fans can enjoy the TCG." Then, if we briefly go back over to the page that they link to, you'll see that they issue a more fleshed out and fully bodied statement. So, we're fully aware that there are certain difficulties purchasing certain Pokemon trading card game items due to high demand and shipping constraints impacting availability. It's an inconvenience, and we're working to address it where it is within our control. I want everyone to remember that for what I'm going to talk about next. In situations where there's limited availability, they're working to print more of the stuff at maximum capacity, and we want to have this stuff to retailers as soon as possible. For new stuff that's going to be coming out, i.e. Shining Fates, Battle Styles, the EV Heroes set, and the 25th anniversary set that I'm sure will be coming out this year as well, we're maximizing production to increase product availability upon release. And we'll continue to reprint the products to replenish stock at retailers as soon as possible. Thank you, blah, blah, blah. So, let's talk about this first and foremost. The first thing that I want to point out is where it is within our control. For anyone who speaks legalese, this is basically a great way of putting out help as a false flag. This is basically like, hey, we have to make a statement, so we're going to make a statement, and here's our statement. But this is great because it also means if they wanted to, they don't have to deliver on this promise. Pokemon could, in theory, do nothing for the remainder of this year, and then when asked how come you put this tweet out earlier in 2021 and did nothing to follow it up, they could just easily say, well, everything that we tried was within our control. What I'm trying to say here is that this is a very good way for them to basically avoid accountability. Notice they're not committing to, increasing product supply by summer of 2021, or, having 25% increase in the production of cards in Q1 2021. As a business person, you would almost kind of expect to hear those type of terms. And those types of terms would be very indicative of a organization that's identified a problem and is working towards getting there by using very strategic goals, right? They're putting forth very clear indicators of how they plan on addressing the issue and committing with numbers. Instead of committing with numbers, however, Pokemon is saying where it's within our control. So when some people don't show up to work because they're still afraid of COVID, it's not within our control. And then when Pokemon mismanages their logistics supply network but doesn't want to pay more trucks to deliver more product to distributors, again, it's not within our control. And the idea here is that they could continue to use that phrase in order to justify their own inaction. In case you haven't picked up on it yet, I've been awfully critical of Pokemon within the past couple of videos when it comes to availability. One of the main reasons for this is because I firmly believe, and again, this is one of those things where my professional background outside of Pokemon gives me the ability to be a little bit more well-read and well-spoken on this stuff. And so what I've come to realize is that, especially as a manufacturing company, Pokemon, at least in some capacity, is in the business of manufacturing trading cards, right? And what they did really well was outsource. So basically, they paid other people to do their printing for them. The problem, however, is that on the flip side of that equation, they mismanaged their supply chain. A lot of companies went out of their way, even before COVID, to prepare for a variety of different contingencies. So, for example, there are some organizations that maintain server sites, and they realize that their server site may be prone to flooding, earthquakes, hurricanes, other natural disasters, or what are typically seen or called acts of God. That basically means like something happened in nature that you really can't control. And whenever that kind of stuff happens, businesses have business continuity plans. That's basically a way for businesses to make sure that they're keeping their mission critical functions up and running. So when COVID impacted businesses in 2020, some businesses were told to shut down because they were non-essential, and that's totally fine. They have to comply with that law and they have to keep their workers safe. No one was asking Pokemon to do that and disobey that order and keep printing Pokemon cards. But some companies were able to then return to business safely once their states allowed them to, and come up with new and creative ways of maintaining social distancing, keeping people safe, and keeping their manufacturing process going. Pokemon, on the other hand, specifically the trading card area, decided they would just continue to print with limited capacity. And because of that, it's impacted the availability of cards. And that is personally why I believe Pokemon is mainly at fault for the situation we find ourselves in. They could have developed more resilient processes, and they could have invested significant amounts of money into automation, into new facilities, and into dedicated printers that would be running the stuff off 24/7. Instead, they just got lazy and said, okay, we'll just let a couple guys in Texas and a couple guys in Georgia print this stuff off. And unfortunately, we ended up in a situation where, because of that, those states got hit hard with COVID. Those states shut those businesses down, rightfully so. And as a result of it, there's now a shortage of Pokemon cards, mainly because Pokemon was never considering a worst case scenario about this stuff and wasn't prepared for the impact that the widespread shutdowns would have. So that's personally why I come off so hard against Pokemon. And now when they're putting out statements like this, all it really goes to show me is that they're still not prepared to dedicate resources to building more resilient production facilities. They're certainly not willing to commit and tell us when we should expect new product. Instead, they're basically building in excuses and skirting around accountability by, including words like where it is within our control. Now, again, the other thing is as soon as possible, which you will see right here. And I want you to bear that in mind because, again, that's not a date. So I've seen a lot of folks get super excited. OMG, the reprints are coming. But what I will advise each and every single person listening to this video to think about is that as soon as possible doesn't mean March, it doesn't mean April, it doesn't mean, go to your retailer this Friday for Shining Fates and expect to see a stack of ETBs waiting for you. As soon as possible could mean October, November, December of this year, if you're lucky, 2022, 2023. Again, they've done a great job of sort of setting themselves up to avoid culpability here. So if supply doesn't increase drastically this year, they're going to be, saying it's not possible or it's not within our control. And again, I admit some factors may very well meet the definition of those particular phrases, yet at the same time, there's a pretty strong likelihood that we're going to continue to see shipping constraints and high demand. And again, unless Pokemon really doubles down and tries to get the stuff out there, it's really not going to help anybody in the immediate, short-term next couple of months, or even next couple of sets. Now, with all of that said, I did want to say, this is likely not going to be a cure-all. In the grand scheme of things, we still have COVID, we still have delays, and we still have shutdowns in some areas. Widespread vaccination is starting to help that, but in the grand scheme of things, you have to bear in mind that, especially in some of the harder hit areas within the United States, it's going to take several months before the combination of all these different factors really allow workers to safely return to work in full capacity. And even then, social distancing and mask wearing may make it impossible for those same printing presses to work with the same efficiency that they would have in a pre-pandemic world. This is really where I mentioned that idea that Pokemon might need to start investing in their own stuff. What Pokemon does right now is they don't print their own cards. They basically outsource to some guys here in the US who print cards on their behalf. They package the cards and distribute it to retailers. Of course, Pokemon still owns the IP, and I believe Pokemon may have a similar setup in Japan, I'm not too sure, but the idea is really simple. It's classic outsourcing. As I'd mentioned earlier in this video and in other videos, they did a really bad job of managing that supply chain, and that's why you saw the supply really kind of shrink in 2020 when those third parties could no longer deliver on their promise to deliver Pokemon cards. What Pokemon could do now is invest in their own stuff by, significantly investing in automated printing presses and their own stuff. They can really make a great situation better by dedicating the time and resources and having a dedicated place where they control the printing. This would be better because, let's just say theoretically they're located in Cuba, which is just a random example, right? If they have a dedicated printing press in Cuba that they control, they can decide, as long as it doesn't conflict with government regulation, they can decide when they want to print. So now it won't be about a third party who has to follow their own location or locale or regulatory requirements. Instead, they just print whenever they want to print, and this way they can control at least some part of the supply. And for Pokemon, part of their business strategy may be, we'll print some, you guys print some, and then this way at least there's adequate supply and demand. But in the grand scheme of things, COVID and delays are going to be around for a long time, at least the next 6 to 9 months, and probably into a few years from now. And as a result of that, don't expect to see stuff on store shelves next week. The other thing to bear in mind is scalpers in the secondary market. Typically there's a cooling off effect that happens whenever there's a flood of supply in an open market. So basically what happens is right now there's a little bit of product out there, there's a lot of scalpers out there. And as a result of this, it's super easy and super simple. People are hoarding what they have and then selling it at a very high price. And since no one else can find this stuff, they're willing to pay the high price. Once more supply starts getting out there, typically what you're going to see is scalpers are going to run to the stores because they already kind of have it figured down to a science. They're going to try to buy this stuff up and seal off the supply increase, because effectively, as long as they control all the supply, they can manipulate the price to be whatever they want it to be. So in theory, if you're a scalper, you're going to run to the store, buy everything up still. Like, even when they start dropping off 100 ETBs and telling Target not to restrict the amount that you can buy anymore, scalpers will still try to buy 20 of them or 30 of them or clear the shelf off. It's during this time that you'll still see high prices, but you might see prices begin to decline. So prices will still be above MSRP on the secondary market, but will likely be less than that of what you saw a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And as time goes on, scalpers will begin to realize they're making less and less of a profit, and that is the best way to beat a scalper, is to unmotivate them. Basically, if they're not getting a good enough return on their investment, they're going to drop it and leave it alone. That's why randomly at certain points in the history of Pokemon, there's been scalping, and then at other times there hasn't, because what other customers want will really drive what prices are, and when prices aren't high enough, there's just not enough reason for me to go out of my way to check target, raid targets, get into fights with people, do all this stuff, and then I'm making $5 per booster box whenever I do that. It just doesn't make sense. But all that said, Pokemon could care less about everything I just said. Truthfully, they're not fighting scalpers. They're just trying to get stuff out there because they realize that as a business, they want to make more money. And obviously, they want to send this stuff to the moon. So as far as they're concerned, they're not here battling scalpers. If they wanted to battle scalpers, there are probably better and more targeted efforts they could be doing, but they're not, because that's not their main goal. Their main goal is getting more product on the store shelves, and they don't really care who buys it. So bear in mind, scalpers, eBay, quick flippers, all those things are still going to be happening even as product arrives on store shelves. It's going to have a little bit of a lagging time frame before we start seeing the impact of that increased availability basically defeating scalpers. So bear that in mind. And yeah, as I said, it's going to take time. It's going to be one of those situations where, as many of these different news sources are saying like, oh, hey, look, they're reprinting, yay, it's all over, it's all free, it's all clear, like, realize it's going to take time. Like, it's not going to be a situation where every single card you've ever wanted is going to be available. The quality on some of these reprints might be sus at best. And so there's definitely a argument to be made here that even though there is tons of reprints being promised, it doesn't necessarily mean the hobby is going to immediately dramatically improve, or that, we're going to scorch scalpers. Like, sooner or later, a lot of scalpers are going to get screwed, but up until a point where we see that starting to happen, it's really not going to change much, even with this news. Now, to flip the script a little bit, I will say help is on the way. The most important thing is time and patience. Like, if you didn't get a chance at Champion's Path, don't worry. I was at GameStop the other day, and I saw, for the first time in my life, I think, I saw a shelf at GameStop full of trading cards. And they were limiting it to 2 per person. And I think that's great, because that means there's more availability out there. There was a time, sometime in late 2020, where you would not walk into a store and see any Champion's Path anywhere in your wildest dreams. So I think it's amazing that there's that increase in availability, and I do think help is on the way. Again, we just have to be patient, let the scalpers burn themselves out, and then we'll be in a better position as a community because everyone will be able to get the cards they want. This was inevitable. That's the other thing to bear in mind, right? Don't get caught up in the hype about how, oh my goodness, they're reprinting everything, hold off. I have told you in the past, don't buy modern product, and this is exactly why. When they start reprinting, they're going to be reprinting Sword and Shield, they're going to be reprinting Rebel, Darkness Ablaze, Vivid Voltage, Champion's Path, Shining Fates, Battle Styles, all that kind of stuff. So that's why when I was telling you don't buy modern, it was because I didn't want you to buy a $199 booster box, because realistically, we all knew sooner or later they were going to reprint this stuff, and when they did, you'd be able to buy that booster box for MSRP, if not less. Especially when the market gets flooded with this stuff, prices are going to drop. Same thing with singles. There's a reason I haven't been picking up cards for my binders, and it's because right now prices are high. Don't buy modern right now. Buy it in a little bit when the prices begin to drop, because this stuff is going to start getting ripped open, flood the market, and at that point you'll have tons more options to choose from, and guess what? They'll all be cheaper than the prices we've been seeing over the past year. The other thing is about the hype, right? Like, don't think that they're going to be reprinting first edition base sets, Skyridge, and Deoxys. I've seen a lot of people who swear that they're going to be reprinting X, Y, Sun and Moon, and everything you can ever think about. And while I think it's a good thing to be hopeful that they're going to be reprinting, you got to ask yourself, as a company, what do you think they're going to be reprinting? Steam Siege? Probably not. They're likely going to be reprinting all of the Sword and Shield era stuff with like heinous intent, and then if they've committed to a small reprint of a different set, they'll probably do that as well. So think of something like Cosmic Eclipse, which we recently confirmed was going to be reprinted. They'll do it, but, you know, shy of that one little reprint, I can't imagine they're going to go back to the print files and grab Burning Shadows and start running off ETBs and booster packs for that kind of stuff. So it's my opinion that if you have that stuff, you're relatively safe. I don't think they're going to be reprinting anything before Lost Thunder and included, so I think you're totally fine if you have that stuff. If you bought it at a little bit higher value, again, that's what I would now consider that to be like near vintage. It's certainly not the most common stuff. And so, you know, if you bought it, don't worry. I think in the grand scheme of things, you'll be fine. But more importantly, don't get caught up in the hype and miss out on those types of opportunities. They're most likely going to be reprinting current generation stuff, and so you should focus in on waiting and being patient about that, and then just sitting and chilling out and realizing that Sun and Moon, XY, and certainly more vintage stuff isn't going to get touched. And anyone who thinks that, or thinks that that's going to cause a massive deflation of price for vintage, is just being silly, and is being unreasonable, because while the two have an effect on one another, the vintage market just can't be touched. And that's the truth of the situation we currently find ourselves in. Finally but not least, this is, you know, definitely not something to take lightly. I'm very excited about the reprints. I really want to rip more current product and do bigger and better openings. So I'm definitely excited, but you know, at the same time, I'm taking a deep breath and I'm managing my own expectations. Again, I don't expect any product from any store this coming Friday for Shining Fates. It's just impossible. It just is. Pokemon can do everything they want. They're not going to be able to keep up with demand right now. But as things get better, and especially as the summer arrives here in the US, I have a feeling a lot more English cards are going to be rolling off presses, because cases of COVID will drop. Governments will be able to open up a little bit more where it's still restricted. And especially in those states where printing presses that Pokemon use are being impacted by shutdowns, I think the general releasing of those restrictions will greatly help the production numbers in the grand scheme of things. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out today's video. Definitely a bit of an interesting one. Again, one of those more opinionated, spicy topic pieces, because I definitely wanted to make abundantly clear both the good and the bad with this announcement. And like everything else, there's equal parts of good and bad, right? But many in the community have been hyping up this idea that this is going to be, you know, the end-all be-all for all things selling above MSRP, when that could be further from the truth. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out today's video. I hope it finds you well, and I thank you for your viewership. As I always say, you could have been anywhere on the internet, but you chose to hang out with me for a little bit, so it's greatly appreciated. If you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button, the like button down below, and ring the bell notification to stay notified for when videos come out. And other than that, thank you guys again, and we'll talk soon. Peace.